Thanks for bearing with me, everybody. We had a little bit of a delay because of COVID, but I'm excited to keep going with lesson 4. The way we start all these lessons is to go through a warm-up of what we've kind of learned before. So the most recent class, lesson 3, was count ifs and sum ifs and average ifs. So just for practice, we're going to kind of go through those real quick. We'll cover lookups in this, and it's really just one function that we get to master and work with. But let's start with the warm-up. This is asking for the number of holdings from the FGI holdings tab. So here are the holdings. There's ticker, CEDL, QSIP, name, all the things that you need. Number of holdings excluding cash. So for the number of holdings, we want to use the countifs. And we want to say where the date is the date here. And the ticker isn't cash. Well, we can just use this one. It's 32 holdings excluding cash. Some of the equity only portfolio weight x cash. So instead of doing the count ifs, we're doing the sum ifs with the weights, but a similar function. Sum ifs, let's sum the weights, and if the date is equal to this date and ticker isn't this cash USD. It's 96.85%, that makes sense. The average equity only portfolio weight x cash. Let's do the average ifs instead of the sum ifs here. So since we already had done it, we can just use it that way. And we could double check it by saying what's the sum divided by the count, and it's 3.03%. I'm going to undo that and leave the average ifs up. The next thing we're going to do is use the sum ifs to get the weight for a specific ticker in each of these dates. So what we want to do is the sum ifs, sum range again is the weights. We're going to do where the ticker is TSM and the date is this date right here. We can paste that down, and those are all of our weights for those months. We just use sum ifs to kind of look up a weight, but one other way to look up things, and we talk about 2 different lookups in this, is a VLOOKUP or an HLOOKUP. The difference between V and HLOOKUP, the formulas are written the same way, kind of structurally, but V is for vertically oriented data, which is probably most of the data that you work with, and then H is horizontally oriented. So VLOOKUP looks left to right, and HLOOKUP looks top to bottom. You can use them together if you need to search left to right and top to bottom in a kind of a grid. But let's go through each one of them kind of individually. So VLOOKUP, the V in VLOOKUP stands for vertical. The way the function's written, you can see it here, but let's bring a bar in over here. So if I say VLOOKUP and I open this, it's asking me for the lookup value. What is lookup value? Lookup value is the thing that you are trying to look up. So if I had, in this case, I'm looking up cash in a specific month or something. So let's just say I wanted to know this date, 12/31/2015, in this set of data. So the lookup value is the thing specifically that I want to look up. And then where do I find the data? I find the data in this table. So that's going to be an array. And you want to include both what you find and what your output is. So if you just do a lookup on this data, you're limiting yourself to only the date. If you want to be able to look up something, whether it's a cell in G or F or H or I, you have to include that in your array. So this table array is, we can go all the way out to H. Now the column index number, that is how far over you want to go. So now that I know that the date is going to be found in A, how far over do I want to go? Let's say I want the weights. You always start with the furthest column to the left that you highlighted. So in this case, it's column A. So if I want the portfolio weights from this table, I would say comma 2, which means go 1, 2 over, and it will give me the weight. And at the end, it's going to ask you for approximate match or exact match. In all my years of using Excel, I've probably only used the true once or twice. It's if you have a list that's sorted alphabetically and you maybe don't have an exact match and you want to get the closest match. But if you know you want to look for the exact match, which is what's going to be the case in most instances, it's going to be false. So you can either write false, type it in, or you can just use 0. So I use 0. It is the Excel equivalent of false. So if I do this, it gives me this result, 5.32%, which is the same as this cell here. So I looked up the date 12/31/2015. So if I change this from looking up 12/31/15, I said 12/31/10, it's 4.41. So it's capturing this. Now if I put, let's just say I put the word John in here. It doesn't have to be a number. So in this case, if I want to look up John and I know I'm looking up 12/31/10, instead of going over 2 for the weight, I need to go over 4. 3, 4. So if I change this 2 to a 4, I will get John. If I change it to a 5, I get nothing, which is what's in this cell. It shows the value as a 0, but there's really nothing in it. If I put 8 in it, it'll show it as an 800%. Percent's weird, but now what if I say, so look, remember we talked about the data array range being important. So in our function that we just built, this goes from A to H. Let's say I put something in I, and I put Peter, and I say, okay, from A to I, it's gonna be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 over. So if I change the 5 here to a 9, what happens is it gives me a reference error, and that's because it says, hey, you only gave me through H, I can't go 9 over. So if I include I in the array, I'm able to get the result. So that's structurally how VLOOKUP works. Let's walk through some VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP below. HLOOKUP is, again, the same. It's just instead of left to right, it's top to bottom. The best way to do this is to look at examples. So let's look at these tables here. So in this case, we've included kind of these helper columns, which include kind of how many over from the reference column you might be wanting to go, and then in this case, how many down. So let's go through this and say, okay, let's use these lookups. And one of the things I need to do is I need to aggregate all the strategy level AUM, and we have actually 2 sub-strategies for each of these parent strategies. So you can see here, this client account, the investment strategy says FGIO, this one says FGI. They should both be considered FGI. So if I use just a sum ifs, I could sum ifs FGIO plus FGI. The other thing I could do is I could look up what the appropriate strategy is from a map. So in this case, there's 2 ways to do this. You can either map all possible values. So in this case, in this approach 1, this table we have translated FGIO to FGI, QGO to QGG, and then FGI is still translated to FGI. So in the first approach, what we're going to do is just say VLOOKUP, and I want to look up the strategy in this first set of data. And I want to lock this table so as I paste down, or this array, so as I paste down, it doesn't change my reference set. I want to go 2 over, and I want the exact match. So what this is going to do is it's going to look up the appropriate strategy. So if I say, okay, well, I need the sum ifs, now I have this mapped strategy, and I can use this as the parent code and sum up those assets. So that works. Actually, what I have to do is I have to lock these ranges. Okay, so approach 2, that was if you want to build a kind of a lookup table for everything. In this second example, I want to show you, what if we just say, well, we want to translate the ones that need to be translated and not just everything. And then this is the case that most things are right as they are. So in FGI, we don't actually need to translate this to FGI. It already is FGI. We only need to translate FGIO to FGI. So what we can do is say, and we did this in the last lesson, is if error, and you can say VLOOKUP, the strategy, in this set of data, lock that range, comma 2, comma 0. So what this is going to do is it's going to say, look for the mapping for this, and if you don't find it, you will get an error. So the alternative when I get an error is just to give me the actual strategy. So let's walk through how this is going. Without this if error, let's see what that looks like. So in this case, for FGI, it's getting an NA because it doesn't find FGI in this table in the left column. It's over here, but the VLOOKUP is only looking in this first column. So it's looking for FGI here. It doesn't find it. It says NA. So that's the case where I say, well, if error, which is how it's processing the NA, then that means the strategy's right because I haven't mapped it. So that's why I'm including kind of both approaches. They're both valid. Sometimes it's going to be easier to map everything, and sometimes it's going to be easier just to map the exceptions or the things you need to translate. One other interesting thing about HLOOKUP and VLOOKUP is they're always going to find the first instance of the value. So let's say we have John, Peter, Mary, Sally. Okay, let's name these. Let's just assign these values like this. So if I'm trying to look up Peter, there's no good way to do it, because if I look up 1 in this array, it's always going to find the first result, and then it stops. So as soon as it finds the 1, which it finds next to John, it's going to say, yeah, give me John. And if I say VLOOKUP 2, it'll give me Mary. I can't get Sally. But if Peter's 2, Mary's 3, and Sally's 4, I can get them all by looking up different numbers. So if they have a unique number assignment, I can look up them individually, but if they share a number with someone else, it's always going to be the first instance. There's a cool thing we can do with if and COUNTIF to assign numbers, only assign it a new number if it changes. So that's what we're doing in the left column over here. So if I want all the unique subtypes, I can say, well, if you've seen, so let's just start with 1. If you've seen this subtype before, so we have mutual fund, defined benefit, commingled, sub-advisory, mutual fund. If you've seen this type before, give me the same number. Otherwise, add 1 to it. So then we're going to carry a number down, and we're only going to add 1 when it changes. So the first 3 are all unique. They each add 1. The fourth one, sub-advisory, is also unique, but mutual fund exists again because it's up here. So in this case, I don't want to add 1. So what this is saying is if the COUNTIFs, and it's looking at the range of data above this one, it's not looking at the whole data set. Because if I said, let's just say COUNTIF, this is mutual fund, you can see there's 3 instances, and that's true for, if I use the whole data set, that's true for all of these mutual funds. But if each time I'm using the data set, I have my range expand based on how far I've gone. So instead of starting at B104 and going to 115, let's go from B104 to 104 here. And then as I expand it, so in this case, it's using all the range above it, you see this is the second instance and this is the third instance. So in this case, I'm saying if it's the first instance, assign it a new number, which is what this is saying. So if the COUNTIFs of the range above it is 1 for this account subtype, then add 1. Otherwise, give me the same number. So you can see we go 1, 2, 3, 4. As it changes again, it's the same. It carries down the 4. When it becomes Taft-Hartley, that's the first time it sees Taft-Hartley. It's seen commingled and mutual fund already. It's the first time it's seeing endowment, and then it's seen defined benefit already. So these numbers don't really mean anything on their own, but because of the way VLOOKUP works, we can use these numbers and the fact that it's changing only when there's a new subtype to pull that unique list of subtypes. So I'm going to use the VLOOKUP here and just look up the number in this set of data. And I apologize if this is feeling daunting. The ifs, COUNTIFs is take some practice. You might want to take a shot or 2 at it to get a sense of what exactly we're doing. But just as an example, you can see all of these when I'm looking at the numbers, because this changes when the number this changes when it's a new subtype. I'm pulling all the unique subtypes here. So sometimes it's nice to refine a list. There's also a way you can, so if I take this just as a shortcut, I can paste it over here. There's a cool thing in Excel where you can remove duplicates. So in data, if you hit remove duplicates, and I say continue with the current selection, you can see my unique list is the same because it's removed those duplicates and it keeps them in that order. So this is how you could do it programmatically without doing the remove duplicates, but both have their uses. Now let's use VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP together. In this case, we have a grid. I have this little helper column. Without it, you wouldn't be able to do the VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP. We'll show you in kind of future lessons how to do index and match, which is kind of another way to look up, but for now let's practice V and H. So in this case, I want to look up based on, this is a drop down, let's say it's arm and let's say company name. So what I want to be able to do is pull from this grid based on these two selection boxes. So let's just start with the VLOOKUP. Let's say, okay, we know we want to look up arm. And where do we find the tickers? Let's say it's this way. And then company name is what we're going after first. That's 4 over. So let's just put 4 in there to start. That seems right. As I change this, yeah, it's getting me the right company name. The problem is if I change this, it's not true anymore. And that's because I've hard locked this 4. So what I really need to do is I need the 4 to be a formula. So we need to calculate how far over you want to go. So what I want to do is I want to look up. So what we can do is say, let's just look at this HLOOKUP over here. And if we do an HLOOKUP on QSIP, and we're doing these two kind of columns or arrays, 2 rows, sorry. So you're starting at the top, it finds QSIP here, and then you go 2 down, it should find the number 3 for us. So that's fun. So when it's company name, it finds 4. When it's sector, it finds 5. So what I can do is I can put this HLOOKUP like this within the VLOOKUP instead of this number 4, and I can say HLOOKUP, lookup sector in this set of data. So we have VLOOKUP, it's looking up ticker from here. Then it's trying to figure out how far over to go, so it uses an HLOOKUP to do that. So this says Christian Hansen is materials, and that's right. So let's play with this. CP, what country is that? Canada. So that's using V and HLOOKUP together. All these exercises are pretty fun and fairly straightforward. You're gonna have to do VLOOKUPs individually, HLOOKUPs, create tables. There's VH, creating a table. You have to use V and H, and you may have to use the account or the holdings tabs for the data. Hope you enjoyed this lesson. We look forward to seeing what you got, and we'll try to put up lesson 5 pretty soon. Thanks.